How do you deal with difficult and challenging situations in life? Well, my cat, for example, often runs away whenever I do anything wrong in her eyes. Although sometimes she pretends that the source of discomfort doesn't exist. Well, she loves sitting on my chair, and whenever I come to do some work, she knows what's going to happen, but acts as if I'm not there. So if I don't reply to an email, this might be why, because my chair is occupied. Sometimes I want to learn from her and do the same. For example, today I decided to skip a part of the Torah reading that talks about animal sacrifices and instead focus on all nice parts of the Torah portion. These 4 verses which we skipped today. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, be just in court, feed the hungry, do not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. These are all universal and good values. But apart from nice messages, there are very, very challenging verses in the code of holiness. How can you live with a religion, a part of which you find meaningful, rewarding and helpful, but another part is deeply problematic? What is the best strategy to deal with difficult texts in Judaism? Let's take an example of such complicated and challenging texts. Well, challenging but at the same time nice texts from our Torah portion. Chapter 18 of the book of Leviticus, just one chapter before the one we read today. On the one hand, it is the peak moment and an interpretive key of Leviticus, the code of holiness. Some Torah commentators say that it is the code and essence of the entire Torah. God speaks directly to the people of Israel, saying, "You shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt or of the land of Canaan. You shall keep my laws and walk in the way of my rules. For when people do this, they shall live by them." It is the last phrase that became the basis of an important principle in Judaism. You shall live by them. Based on these verses, the Babylonian Talmud confirms that the primary goal of the laws of the Torah is to uphold life. The question came up in Maccabean times when the Hellenistic army attacked a group of Jews on Shabbat. The most zealous Jews refused to go to a war on Shabbat and were killed. The Maccabees, and after them the Talmud, ruled the contrary. They took a position that every law in the Torah is intended to uphold life. Therefore, almost every law in the Torah should be overridden in order to save a life or protect one's health and well-being. The Talmud proves this point using this very verse from chapter 18. When a person does God's commandments, he or she shall live by them and not die by them, adds Talmud. This is a nice message and interpretation, emphasizing the highest value of human life and establishing an important principle of pikuach nefesh, responsibility of saving one's life, even at the expense of breaking however many commandments you want or you need. The same chapter has a verse which most people today would consider homophobic and inappropriate, deeply, deeply problematic. And with a male, you shall not lie the lyings of a woman. It is a toeva, Leviticus 18, chapter 22. This is the literal translation of the verse. I did it deliberately, where each word is translated in the closest form to its original Hebrew word. This way we made English sound like Hebrew to help us to understand what the verse says in its original language. This verse is one of the sources often cited to prove the point that homosexuality, and in particular the same-sex relationship between men, are strictly forbidden by the Jewish law. Well, our community has many openly gay people and members of LGBT+ community. What shall we do with this verse? One strategy would be to ignore it or deliberately skip it when we read from the Torah. This way we protect our members and create a safe space for all, regardless of their sexuality and gender. Historically, liberal Jews often apply this strategy with problematic texts. For this reason, for example, Purim was not celebrated at the LJS for many years. It is back now, although we don't read with reluctance the most problematic chapters during the Megillah reading. Another strategy to deal with the seemingly homophobic verse is to reinterpret it. Rabbi Reuven Greenberg is one of the leading experts in this approach. He argues that we can go deeper to the meaning of this verse and try to understand what it really means. If Torah wanted to forbid homosexual relationship, why didn't it simply say a man should not lie with a man? Why adding you shall not lie the lyings of a woman? Why this additional phrase? Applying a simple logic to this argument, you can say that maybe it is there to claim that you can lie the lyings of a man. The ancient patriarchal society often portrayed a woman as an object and often as a possession of a man. Maybe the verse from Leviticus 18 emphasizes the importance of consensual relationship between the two individuals. Therefore, this verse might not be what many homophobic Jews claim it to be. The word to'eva, the last word, is deliberately left in its Hebrew transliteration. It is often translated as abomination. But the truth is that we don't know what the exact meaning of this word is. It's often the case with biblical Hebrew, and the way we deal with it is that we find other verses, other places in Tanakh where this word is used, and work out the meaning from the context. So in many other verses, the word to'eva is used in the context of the prohibition of idolatrous practices. In fact, the holiness code too has the theme of prohibition against worshipping other gods. Therefore, maybe the prohibition of the same-sex relationship is only valid if it's used in pagan ceremonies. There is one more strategy we can use when we deal with difficult texts. As Jews, we are commanded to study and engage with life. Hillel used to say, don't separate yourself from the community. We need to be part of the society and not to be afraid of being different from others. Kedoshim tiriyu ki kadosh ata. Be holy, because I, the Eternal One, your God, is holy. The best way to translate the word holy, kadosh, into English is to say different, distinguished, separate. Don't be afraid to be different. To approach Torah in this way has the main purpose to adhere life. If anything goes against life and against moral standards of humanity, we can simply say it is wrong. As Jews, we can say that the Torah got it wrong and to argue with it. After all, we are called the people of Israel, the people who wrestle with God, with our tradition, and with the norms of society that go against the main principle, the principle of life. Let the holiness code be extended to all people as a message for peace, celebrating diversity, celebrating our values, meaningful relationship with God and Judaism. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will.